Welcome to the Flip Your Script podcast. I'm Kristi Piehl. This is a truly special episode, but first, some context. This podcast launched in May 2020, just as COVID had shut down the world. Thanks to a shipment of equipment and FaceTime with engineers, we set up a makeshift studio in my guest bedroom. The first piece of content we released was my own story, from anchor to entrepreneur. And thanks to 170 brave, courageous, remarkable guests who shared their stories since then, we fulfilled our mission of talking to people who could offer hope, inspiration, and motivation. And now it's time to turn the page, time for a new chapter in the podcast. But we're going to get to that later. First, I needed a truly special story to end this Flip Your Script podcast chapter. So many guests boldly shared, and I felt like I had to do the same. But I wasn't sure this episode would be possible because it required the participation of a very special person to agree to share his story so I could share part of mine. Alec is my youngest son. Welcome to the Flip Your Script podcast.
Thank you. It's an honor. Honored to be here.
And I've mentioned both my kids at different times in the podcast and said, I can say this because they're never going to hear it because they don't listen to the podcast. Okay, so why did I want Alec to come on the podcast? Well, I want to paint you a picture. So it's February 22nd, 2024. Let's think about the morning of that day, Alec. Okay. You're a college football recruit. You're a junior in high school. You're in the middle of a college search. We'd already looked at some colleges. You're a basketball player. You were planning to start an ultimate Frisbee high school team in the spring.
Yep.
You're a church volunteer. You had just started, and I'm going to get my terms right, talking to a young woman.
Yes. Nice. There you go.
Yes.
There you go.
And you had just talked to a high school football coach about your senior season and a position you wanted to play. And there was some expectation that some big colleges might be interested, but you weren't sure if that's what you wanted. So you're living the dream, right? Like life is good.
I was, yeah.
Okay. So
seemed like it.
Yeah. Then February 22nd, you played a game in my least favorite high school gym of all time, Holy Angels. And your dad and I were both sitting in the stands. And something happened that totally changed not just that day, but I would say the trajectory of your life.
Oh, by a long shot. I was just talking to a few of my friends about this, how this whole thing just completely changed my life.
Changed mine as well. So what do you remember about before that and the injury?
Like my mindset before the injury?
Yeah, mindset.
Well, I mean, my mindset before the injury was I thought totally differently of how my life trajectory was. I thought I was either, I mean, as you were saying, I was in the college search, whether that be football or not. I mean, I visited a few schools for academics, a few like medium, big size schools, and I hadn't done any football visits because for high school football, they have junior days, and that's when you come and visit with a big group of people, and they're in like spring break, which was like right after I got my surgery, so I didn't get to go on any, which was really unfortunate. But I had 10 college coaches talking to me. My plan was either big school or bust. It was either like good D2 or D1, and then or just go for academics for a place I'd love. And that was all I was really thinking about, focusing on getting good grades, doing well in athletics, and then I was playing a basketball game in Holy Angels, and then knee blew out, you know.
What do you remember from you said knee blew out. So what do you remember from it? Like the injury?
It was an inbound play. I was on offense. A good friend of mine was throwing the ball in. He was the quarterback for us. And so we decided to call it football play on an inbounds play because they knew all of our inbounds plays. It was just 4 verts, so I just run straight, and I ran straight. I burned my defender. It was a perfect ball. I slowed down, which was my fault, and then I caught it. And then when I caught it, I was like, my momentum was running way forward because I slowed down. And when I went to stop myself with my left foot, my knee kind of twisted a little bit for just a split second. And I remember hearing and feeling a pop. I tried to get up right after, but I just knew right away that something was wrong. I didn't know whether that was like I sprained just one thing or I completely blew out my knee. And fortunately, I completely blew out my knee. And I was just,
Did you say fortunately?
Fortunately, what?
You completely blew out your knee?
I said, did I say fortunately?
You may have.
I meant unfortunately.
But as it turns out,
maybe it was fortunately. Maybe it was fortunately. I think what I was saying with my friends yesterday was they were asking the same guy who threw me the inbounds pass asked me yesterday before basketball practice if this was the worst thing that happened to me. And then I said my instinct was just to say yes. But then the more I thought about it, 2 seconds later, I said, actually, I think it was the best thing that could have happened to me. And then I basically explained where I just explained how my life was on a total trajectory, and now I'm on a completely different path. And I think, like me as a person, and the path I'm on now is way better than I would have been on before.
So it's so interesting, Alec, because so many of our guests have said similar things. And watching you go through it, I would say it's the worst and the best thing that ever happened to our family, probably, because we're all different. And in a few minutes, we're going to have your brother come in and we're going to hear his take. Most people who have gone through terrible adversity say that, of course, you wouldn't wish it on anyone. You wouldn't want it to go through it again. But it changes you. And it does. And it can change you for the worse or for the better. And you have to make a decision. So from my perspective, I was sitting in the stands and you went down and the coach came over and then he looked at me and he did the, come here thing. And how many times in your life have you heard me cuss? Ever?
Never.
Yeah. So the people,
cussed?
I realized later, like there was a child sitting there, but I knew in that moment, like something horrible had happened. And I just continued to say the same word over and over again. And I went running down because...
Do you want to share what that word letter
It started with an S. It started with an S.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I was hoping you would say that instead of F.
I never say the F word. No.
Okay, good.
No. So I just repeated because I didn't have another word. And I think it speaks to the gravity and the shock and the otherworldliness of it. And also when I read your intro before and I talked about what you were in that morning, if I would have read that to 25 people, they would be like, sounds like a jerk.
Yeah, I would never say ever in my life I was a jerk. My resume, I guess you'd say, and my plan, I unfortunately would say that my life was on a trajectory. I don't think I'd ever become a jerk, but I would say I was immature. I wouldn't say jerk. I was just like your average... Pains me to say this, but I feel like I was just like a kind of a jock. I mean, I was never mean to anybody. I just feel like I was a little immature. The path I was on was just very, like, easy.
Self-centered?
Yes, I was not thinking about anybody else. I was just doing everything for me. And then this injury happened, and I feel like I turned my life not only focused on others, but towards God.
It took a couple of doctors to even realize how bad the injury was, because you didn't just, it wasn't like an ACL. Right. It was like your whole life have done things like kind of spectacularly.
I always prided myself on saying I never got seriously injured. I remember my brother, he broke his arm. And I remember that, and like my mind, especially, how old was I when you think he broke his arm? Like
elementary school, first, second grade.
Yeah. I remember at the time, I thought that was like one of the worst injury that could happen. And before then, the worst I think I'd done was like broken my pinky toe or sprained my wrist. What happened, like fully to my knee, was I had 3 tears, 3 sprains, and 5 fractures, which you kind of can't do more than that. I mean,
don't tempt it.
Yeah, there's 6 ligaments in your knee, and every single one was at least sprained or torn.
So this all happens, and we're in these different doctors' offices, and literally college coaches, football coaches are reaching out to you and calling while we're in these doctors' offices. So that happened at one of the physicians' offices when we were told that you wouldn't have a senior football season. Right. It's going to need surgery, and your whole senior season is gone. And we all, Dad and you and I were in the room, and like we had a moment. Like everyone's like tearing, and you had your head up first. And you had a moment, and then you popped your head up, and we got the rest of the information, and then we got in the parking lot, and it was just me and you because Dad was in another car, and I said something about like, how are you doing? And do you remember what you said, or what's your reaction? What's your reflection? Because for me, that was the moment when I went, oh my gosh, he's going to teach me some things through this. You said something like, God has a plan. It's going to be okay.
Yes, I do. Yes, I said that a lot because there's a lot of rough times, but I just had to keep. The only way to stay positive was to think that like this is all happening for a reason. There's a higher power than me that chose for me to go through this, and it's obviously for a reason.
And some people would say, I don't want to get into the theological debate, and please don't like DM me about the theology of any of this because we're just here to share people's experiences and stories. And some people would say bad things happen and then you can turn them into good things. And some people say there's a reason and whatever, but something terrible happened and you chose to reframe it. And the terrible, terrible days following that surgery, awful. I mean, so terrible. I'm sure that there are worse things, but I do believe if something worse would happen, like we could get through it because we got through this thing. Anyway, all that to say, this whole recovery is happening and you're changing and your body is healing, but your mind is changing and healing as well. And the parts of what you went through that apply to anyone who's going through an adversity, because you said it really well, Alec, like up until this injury, a pinky toe was a terrible, terrible adversity.
The worst I had faced.
Right. And that at the time felt like terrible, right?
And I was on a boot for a week, or like a week or 2 weeks. I don't know. I remember like in my mind, and a bad injuries like timeline was maybe a few weeks. I didn't really think it could get to 12 months. Like that's kind of just, it wasn't even in the picture. And then this happened. Then I'm like, it's just like it was like a reminder that you're not invincible and that you are human still. You're not infallible or,
Which most teenagers, and especially I would say stereotyping teenage boys, don't really get.
For some teenage guys to get that, a lot of my friends, they have to get in car crashes or to realize that I'm not this omnipotent 16, 17-year-old guy that can do whatever they want because I'm just a teenager. But like I was talking about, I think it all happened for a reason.
So the adversity piece of it, you were physically obviously injured. You crutches for 6 weeks plus, and inability to do all sorts of things. And a lot of people said things to you, strangers. And this is the piece in having this conversation I think that anyone can benefit from and learn from, because I certainly learned watching it. What did people say to you that was the wrong thing to say?
When people see me on crutches, or they used to see my huge knee brace, or just like me limping, they first asked what happened. And then I would explain to them what happened, and they'd go, "Oh, that's terrible. Oh, that's awful. Oh, I'm so sorry." Or like, "Oh, that's not fair." That every time somebody told me that, I feel awful. Because it's, I know. You don't need to remind me that this sucks. What helped was like when people would say, "I'm praying for you," or like, "You'll get through it. You'll become stronger from this." And I took that. I realized what to say and what not to say to people that are going through tough times. And a friend of mine is having his knee surgery today. And I was texting him this morning, and I've been texting him ever since he tore it. And I've been texting him about how I'm praying for him. He'll do better. There's nothing to worry about. You'll be great. When I think that's the best thing you could tell somebody going through adversity.
Such a good point, because I could physically see when strangers would come up to you and say, "Oh, that's terrible," and "Oh, you're a senior, no football." It's I could just see you physically crumple a little bit. It's we know.
I don't need a reminder.
Yeah, you had to grieve a thing that you thought was going to happen that wasn't going to happen. And that happens to many people, whether they can't have a child or they lose a parent or they lose a job. We have expectations of how things are going to turn out, and they don't. And whether it's an injury or something else that happens to you, I think you figured out how to make it happen for you. And that shift is so important. So if you see someone hurt, our advice and the book that we should write is What to Say to People Who Are Hurt.
Yes.
And it's, you're going to get through this, and I have faith in you, and not, wow, that would be terrible.
Like,
Turn away from that.
I can't imagine, or something. Yeah.
Tell someone else that. Don't tell the person who's hurt that. Because I also saw some really lovely and honestly some older folks come up to you at different places and say such lovely, kind things that really touched you.
Yes.
And so many of our friends and folks from church and teachers and so many people were so kind and brought things over to the house and sent meals. And you don't realize how strong your community is until you go through something like this.
Exactly. You don't realize how many people actually care for you until you said have something like this happen.
And then there were other people who, friends of yours, who I think your relationship eroded some because they, I think, saw in you the reality that bad things happen and they didn't want to look at it.
Yeah.
So they kind of avoided you.
Yeah, it was pretty awkward going back to school in crutches. Like, my really good friends were like, oh man, it's great to see you, hope you're doing well. But then, like, say the other half of like mutuals or just, I guess, purely beneficial friendships either ignored me or would just say like single word responses to things I'd say because I was a reminder of what's possible. And the worst was when I'd go to my girlfriend's AAU tournaments and I'd walk in on crutches because it's very obviously, I mean, I have a huge knee brace on, they can see, and I'm not a small person. I mean, I look like an athlete, and so they could obviously tell it was from sports, and I mean, knee injuries mainly happen in basketball. So and I'd walk through and just players, coaches, parents, everybody would stare at me for like a minute and like visibly and physically get like fearful because they're like, holy cow, this could happen to my kid or myself or my player. And it was not fun going to those. I mean, it was fun because I got to watch my girlfriend play basketball, but when I'd like just walk through and sit there and just everybody staring at me, it just felt like I was like a zoo animal almost.
Yeah, it was though. People did make way for you. It was we had a handicap sticker.
I had handicap parking for 2 months, which at the time when like first we got that, I was like, this is unnecessary. I'll be back walking in like not that long, and then I didn't until it was gone, I didn't realize how like necessary that was, and how I genuinely needed it.
So another little tactical tip. If you ever are tempted to park in handicap parking and you don't need it, please don't.
Yes, please. Like,
people who need it, need it.
I mean, I'd see other people that need it too. And then I'll see like somebody pull up in a handicap spot where I don't know if it's like a fake or whatever.
They just
it's
run
like,
into the
it's
store.
not their car. It's like their mom's, and they just take the nicest spot and they're just like running. And I'm like, why? I mean, just be thoughtful and compassionate.
Thoughtful and compassionate. Okay, the other thing we've seen since your injury is how many ACL injuries? So many.
You don't realize it's like a community. You never think about it. I mean, the only time I'd heard of ACL injuries was like NBA players, like Derrick Rose, and players' careers almost falling off from their injury, and that was kind of all I knew, and it was pretty rare. But I think that's mainly because the ones you know of are the big ones that like really have an impact on people, but you rarely only see it in like professional athletes, or at least that's what I thought. And then you tear it, you get your surgery, and especially like physical therapy. I go to the TCO in Plymouth, and I see people, and they like talk to me about it, and they're like, yeah, I know a buddy or two, or somebody will come up to me and be like, oh, back in '84 I tore mine, and I'm like, what? And it was,
you had ACLs back in the 80s?
I know. You had surgeries, you had doctors. Yeah, it was a eye-opening. Don't want to scare anybody listening. It's not common, but it's more common than you'd think.
Sadly. Yeah, sadly.
Yeah, very
and
sadly.
I said at the beginning, Alec, that I would also share my perspective. And the part of it that I think is the most impactful, and we've talked about this with other guests on the podcast, but I haven't had a front row seat to it before, is identity. When you put your identity in a job or a sport, or parents, as I'm the parent of a college football recruit, like whatever you put your value in. And we see these people, and Dad and I enjoyed when you were getting calls or whatever. It does become a thing. And I think when we put our identity in things that can be taken, you set yourself up for heartbreak, and your identity shifted through this experience. Had you ever thought about that before?
Yeah, I mean, I completely changed who I am for, I believe, only the better. Like, I'm a much more grounded person. I'm looking more to the future for not just myself, but people around me and what I can do positively for the world. And I mean, I still don't know what that is yet. That's what college is for. I'm trying to figure that out. But I just know whatever I do, I'm going to be happy doing it. And not just self-centered, looking for money and success.
And we butted heads a bit more prior to the injury.
Yeah, and after, but
You mean right after? Well,
Yeah.
I blame the drugs. Yours,
Well.
not mine. But I mean, it was difficult and painful, and emotions were everywhere around our house. But I mean, we don't like fight, but we
Right.
had more disagreements about really ridiculous things before.
so pointless.
It's so pointless, right? It's so pointless. So again, back to you won't wish it on anyone, but it changed you for the better. It's a weird thing to say. It feels strange. Okay, so this story has a happy ending, and there is a comeback. There is a
Yes.
comeback story that is yet to be written, and you've made a college decision,
I have.
and it is not the college decision or the future that anyone expected.
Especially
but
me. I
No.
would have, if you would have told myself for this injury what I would like my college plan is, I would have laughed.
yeah,
I
you
would have
would.
said absolutely no way. Like even after the surgery, I thought I knew what I was gonna do, and I mean, we talked about this plan, and I was like, just there's no way. There's no way.
To fill people in that don't have any context of what we're talking about, Alex sort of felt like right after the injury that was sort of the signal, like, well, I guess I'm not going to play college football.
Yes,
So the dream died, right?
I read that as God, a sign from God saying, no more football for you, no more sports. Because I read that as God, like I was going to go down a path of like big college football, and my life was just going to, I don't know what was going to happen. I'm glad I don't have to find out. But I read that as just academics and a solid career.
So you sort of felt like college football was over, and we had looked at some kind of bigger schools focused on academics, and your academics were, going really well. And then suddenly football practice started, and you had made a commitment, which I really, really respect and admire, Alec, that you, even though you knew you couldn't play high school football, you said, you know what, I'm part of this team. I'm still going to go, right? I'm still going to be part of this team. And so you were going to practices during the summer. And then it was the first day that pads were worn in high school football practice. And you came home, and I happened to be standing in the kitchen, and I said, how was it? And you said,
This is I miss it.
I don't think I'm done with football.
Yeah.
And
Well, I was like maybe 60 or 50% sure I wasn't. I just had to think about it. But seeing like real football being played, it just made me realize how much I'm going to miss it.
And I think the other point I really want to make, and it's totally different, but I think there's some applicability to it, is when people would say to you, yeah, it might not be a word. Don't Google it or try to spell it. When people would say to you, oh, that's tough, or oh, that sucks, right? When you were injured, when you tell other people that, like me, an adult parent, mother, tell someone, oh, my kid is going to play high school football. They're like, oh, seriously, how could you let your kid play football? That's so dangerous. So
Yeah.
I was actually I don't really want you to play football after high school because, injuries and all these things. And I was like, when your kids are little, you protect them, right? You are right next to them when they walk, and you don't want them to get hurt. And then suddenly you find yourself handing keys to a car to a kid, and you think, what is happening? Like, I am supposed to keep you safe, and now I'm handing you a deadly weapon and putting you in front of other people with deadly weapons. And then football felt like that's not safe. Like, my job is to keep you safe. And one of the things that I learned through all of this is stuff happens, and you got to live your life, and you need to enjoy the time and the opportunities you have, because your injury happened when you were by yourself standing at the end of a basketball court with no one around you. So you have to take every opportunity you can, because you never know when you won't have the opportunity. So our position all along was, do what you want to do, but don't be afraid to get back out there if you want to get out there. And if you do want to play football, you can't start that when you're 45. That is a young person's game. So you came in the house and you said, I don't think I'm done. And we happened to receive several that week invitations, handwritten invitations from coaches to come to game day recruiting events. And the first one we got was the place that you said, absolutely not, no way am I going there. Bethel University, where I went, where your older brother is about to graduate, and where I sit on the board for and am very involved with.
I just wanted to get a feel and go on a game day visit. And then I don't know, I feel like almost right when I got there, I just felt like that's where I wanted to play and be. I visited schools in Milwaukee, Chicago, and I thought...
Nashville.
Yes, Nashville.
and then you went to this game day and you decided to go to Bethel. So then the recruiting process is an interesting one, and you received an opportunity to play there in a position, and you said yes.
Yes.
And
Now I will be playing football next year at Bethel University.
How are you feeling about that?
It's incredibly excited, and I just can't wait for the minute I can play football again. Like, it was really, really hard, especially on like games my senior year. Watching like my best friends I've been growing up with playing football. And I mean, we were a really good team. We were winning. They were dominating, and it was really tough that I wasn't able to be out there and play with them. But it was a little physically enduring, and you don't realize that physical side of it is actually a blessing, that you get to endure what you do. But I just view it as a curse. Like, almost every day in practice, I would say to myself, oh, I want to quit so bad. Gosh, this is awful. And then the games come, okay, I'll stay for another week. And then you get hurt, and you don't realize that those practices I missed so much. Just to practice like once, I would have gone through like getting tackled for 2 hours just to be around the sport. You don't realize it's actually a blessing, not a curse.
And what a gift it is to have the opportunity and showing up somewhere and saying, I get to do this, and I'm choosing to do this instead of I have to do this. So when you step on the field, what's your mindset? Like, when you get to actually get cleared, because you're still not cleared, but you're going to be able to play, and you're going to put pads on again this summer, and you're going to get after it. You have something to prove?
Yes. A lot.
I kind of feel bad for whoever lines up across from you.
If you ask what goes through my head and for a game, well, first off, nothing. Like, in game, it's kind of crazy. Literally nothing. I don't think about anything. I'm just playing, and you don't think about what you're doing. You just do it. It's really hard to describe. You kind of have to.
They call that the flow state. You get out there the first time. Are you going to be ready to approach it with such a different mindset than you would have had you not had the injury?
I mean, every day, I like picture myself just like back on the field and playing football again. I'm never going to do anything like 50. I'm going 100% on everything, because you never know when it's going to be your last time you're doing something. Thankfully, my junior year, when I was playing football, I did go 100%.
And your 100% post-injury is going to be a lot different than 100% pre-injury, because your mind is different.
Yes.
So in thinking about all of that, I want to bring your brother in, because he also has, shifted through the injury. So we're going to bring Eli in.
Okay.
So if you're watching it on YouTube, Eli appeared where there was a plant, and Eli has joined us now. Eli is a senior in college, so almost 5 years older than Alec. And you were in college when all this happened and heard about it and experienced it in little bits of time. So you didn't see the everyday progression and the emotion and the grief in quite the same way that Dad and I did, up front and personal, up close and personal. So what is your take on going through it, and how's your brother changed? How have we changed as a family? How have you changed?
Okay. I saw Alec probably change the most. I never played football. I ran cross country. I didn't have the best outlook on football players, but then seeing Alec be that kind of more stereotypical high school football player, and then turn into something that I haven't really seen him become, which is mature. I'm the older brother. I always see him as like a little baby, but then being like, oh my gosh, he's a man. This is weird. And I think it was really hard at first because I couldn't be there as the big brother. Like, I decided to stay in Minnesota during COVID because I wanted to be around. I wanted to be around for Alec's life. In high school, I wanted to go to games. I still wanted to be a presence. And I think it was really beating up on me that I couldn't be there. So I really tried to come home as much as possible when my schedule allowed, and it was really cool to see. At first it was so hard just to see like Alec in so much pain, but then every time I came home, I like maybe every other week I would come home, and like the amount of growth in every single time I came home was remarkable. Oh my gosh, like just those small things that I took so much for granted. And 20% is what happens, 80% is what you do with it. And I'm guessing you see that a lot with guests on your podcast of bad things happen to everyone, but you can't control your knee exploded, but you made the most out of what you could.
So I asked him earlier, he kind of said it, is it the worst thing or the best thing? When you look at that and how it changed you and how it changed him and how it changed us collectively and his trajectory, because even, we didn't get into it, but even what he wants to go into college to be, now it's more something maybe to help other people, which is pretty different. All these things have shifted because of this injury. Best thing, worst thing? Do you think about it differently?
I think I view everything as like a good thing. Like everything happens for a reason, and it's just what you do with it. Like you couldn't have controlled what happened. You couldn't have done anything different, and you couldn't have controlled what happened, but you can control the outcome. And I think you made the best out of the situation that you could have.
Did I miss anything, you guys? Anything you really wanted to say?
I mean, I think just like with your like college trajectory, I think you now looking more into medical and helping people is you wanting to now be there for other people that hope if you go all the way through, be that person for someone else and be that positive influence, I think is, and like you talked about the community that you found that most people, I never even thought about that before listening to you guys during that part. So I think you wanting to contribute to that community that has given you so much is like impactful.
So I want to give you the opportunity to thank, Alec. You have a Christian Nicole thank you to give?
Very much so, yes. Christian and Nicole are my physical therapists, and Nicole was with me. She was my physical therapist during the earlier stages for most of the time, and now I see her maybe once every few weeks, and she helped me a lot.
You were in so much pain the first time we saw her and met her. You were passing out, and I could tell the look on her face was like, oh my goodness. And she's small, like she's a petite woman.
Yeah,
and
we were in PT, and I was doing like there was a stretch I was doing it where I was on like one knee. I was like kneeling, and I was taller than her kneeling. It was very funny.
So she helped tremendously. Christian helped tremendously.
Yes. Christian's my other physical therapist. I'll see him later today, actually. And he's a Bethel alum, which also I think he made a great impact on my college decision. He's like also a football guy, and he was a lineman in college, and it's like he knew what to say to help me, and it was very impactful for me. Thank you, Christian and Nicole, for all you've done for me.
We're going to end this final podcast with the way that I end every podcast, which is to share a quote that has helped you as you flipped your script, because Alec, your life has been flipped, and Eli has had a front row seat for it and has also had some scripts flipped as well. So if you could each share a quote, and I did not set this up. I didn't give you what to say. Who wants to go first?
Okay, so I have Jeremiah 17:7-8 says, "Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, whose trust is in the Lord. He is like a tree planted by water that sends out its roots by the stream and does not fear when heat comes. For its leaves remain green and is not anxious in the year of drought, for it does not cease to bear fruit." And I think this has like double meanings for Alec for Alec and me. It was really hard not to be there, and I had to do a lot of trusting and praying of this is what's supposed to happen, and you're here for Alec. And I think that was a lot for me of just I wish I could have dropped out of school and stopped doing everything I was doing and just been Alec's caretaker, but that's not the reality I could do. And so I think it was just like, this is on you, trusting that you're getting the best help and surrounding yourself with the best people, and that you're going to make the most out of this. And I think for you, like how I would interpret that verse for you is just not being anxious about what's going to happen, but just trust and do those day-to-day tasks and those hourly tasks and see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And you were so impacted that you actually now have a tattoo.
Yeah, so I have a lot of I have 8 tattoos, and I wanted to dedicate one to Alec, and so I have his handwriting as a child. This is Big Brother with the heart. that he wrote when he was younger, and I put it right on where his scars are on my left side, just to always remember that, like, that's my role in all of this and just everything he's gone through. Whenever I'm doing something that's such a minor task but I might find hard, I was like, well, if Alec got his way through this, I can do anything. So
when you're squatting and you're like, this weight is heavy, and you see the tattoo, you're like, I actually can do more than I think. Yeah. Your turn.
Mine is my birth Bible verse. James 1:17. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. I think that speaks through me through this. It's like everything happens for a reason. Everything is out of your control because God is doing it. And that verse really helped me through my surgery to remind myself that this is not my choice, but it's happening for a reason.
Wow. The quote that has motivated me during difficult times of my life and during times when I know that I need to step up in courage or have more boldness, the same quote applies. And I have it in my office here. I have it at home. I haven't tattooed it yet, but maybe that's the next one. I don't know. So here's the quote. It's Ralph Waldo Emerson. Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. And the reason I love that quote is that part of being a leader, part of being a mother, part of running this business is that part of my role is to go ahead and to clear the way so that when others come, it's a little bit easier and the path is less difficult. And it doesn't mean that there aren't still going to be roadblocks and things that folks have to go through. But if I can go ahead and lock arms with others to come with me, and we can make it a little bit easier for others around us, then to me that is part of my role and part of why this quote speaks so deeply to me and has for many years. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for, helping other people who are going through tough things. And I don't think the scale of tough matters. The mindset has to get you through, whether it's a long line at the grocery store or a car accident or a job loss or difficult things. You can do more than you think. So as we conclude the podcast, it has been a great joy. And Eli, you helped set up the original podcast studio in the basement or in the guest room in the middle of the beginning of the pandemic. So it felt fair and appropriate to bookend this with two people that matter most to me on the planet as we wrap up the podcast. The stories have been remarkable. I've been so honored with how people have openly shared their stories. And I want to thank Studio Americana, who has been with us the whole way. Michaela, Megan, Lauren, Holly, Christina, a lot of folks that have helped make this thing real. Heidi, Kaisha, many people are working on making this podcast a reality. But I will end the same way I end all, with a little bit different twist. My hope is this podcast has empowered you to believe you're capable of more than you think, to discover motivation, to uncover inspiration, and to find the strength to turn the page.